Hey, this is Mr. O'Byrne, and we're going to go ahead and wrap up this unit on negative numbers. We've gone over the three operations so far: multiplying, adding, and subtracting negative numbers. The reason why I didn't really touch up on dividing negative numbers is because the rules follow the exact same thing as multiplication. Let's get into addition and subtraction first, because in my opinion, adding and subtracting negative numbers are more difficult than multiplying or dividing negative numbers. So let's dive right in. One big mistake that I see going on is this whole fear of a negative number plus a positive number, which in the beginning I thought would maybe be very easy to tell people, but unfortunately it isn't. A negative number plus a number. Some people want to know, is it going to be negative at the end? Is it going to be positive at the end? It's not like multiplication and division where we can just look at the signs and the number of signs and figure out whether it would be negative or positive. With addition and subtraction, it depends, except for one circumstance when they're both negative and they're adding each other. When we have a negative number and we add another number, we can actually just switch it around so it's n minus n, but let's not confuse people yet, and let's just go with a quick example. Negative 2 plus 4 equals, give it a shot real quick, negative 2 plus 4. Now what we got to think is that if you want to go with a number line idea, we go like this, we draw a number line. Here's 0, here's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and on the opposite side we have negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, and negative 4. And a lot of these things, it's nice to draw about a number line and maybe check your work or show your understanding. So we start at negative 2 right here, so I'm going to put a little back of an arrow right there, and we need to know whether we go right or left on the number line. When we're adding something, we go to the right of the number line. So how many spaces are we going to go over? We're going to go over 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and end up right there at 2. So negative 2 plus 4 is actually going to be 2. You can think about this as 4 minus 2 because of the commutative property, where we can switch anything in order when it has to do with multiplication or addition. But basically you need to know that a negative 2 plus a 4, you're going up more, so it's going to be basically kind of like subtraction. Now, let's go to the other circumstance when it's just a positive number in the beginning and then adding a negative number. So let's do the same example of 4 plus a negative 2. So this might get some kids thrown off because you got 4. One of our rules is actually a number minus a negative number. You switch the two negative symbols into an addition symbol. But this one isn't, because there's a positive and there's a negative right next to each other. So there is an addition already thrown in. So we're actually just subtracting n. So we're taking n and we're subtracting n. So we're adding or totaling up with a negative number. So let's do 4 plus negative 2. What is that going to give us? 2. Because if you want to look at it, we're just subtracting 2, really. We're not adding 2. We're adding a negative 2. All right. Another one that gets kids after we do the number minus a negative number is when we do a negative number plus a negative number. For some reason, that gets people caught up a little bit too. And that's why I like to put parentheses around it. So a negative number plus a negative number. We've got negative 2 plus negative 3. We can leave it like that, or we can put it in parentheses. So I'm going to put it in parentheses right here. Negative 2 plus negative 3. You can think of addition as total as well. How much total amount of negative numbers do I have? We take negative 2 plus negative 3. That's negative 2 and bring along another negative 3, and that ends up being negative 5. You bring in negative 2 plus another negative 3 for a total package of negative 5. So the answer is negative 5 right there. And that almost wraps up addition and subtraction, but we have our handy-dandy little rule right here, where if you have n and you subtract a negative number, you really just take that and you turn it into a positive number and get rid of those. Let's do it here on a larger scale, over here, to the left of the screen. When you have a negative number and you subtract a negative number, This may seem daunting at first, but these two negative numbers turn into a positive number actually. So they combine together. If that confuses you a lot, you can see my video on adding and subtracting negative numbers. But these come together to become an addition number. And once they're an addition number, it's negative n plus plus, basically n, negative n plus n. So let's do a example problem. Let's do negative 3 minus a negative 2. All right? So there's a couple ways we can look at this. We can either say these both come down to create a addition symbol, so they both collapse into each other, become an addition symbol, or we can say that those two negatives just become two positives if they're right next to them, because they're like signs. No matter what you do, it becomes negative 3 plus 2. And as we've looked at before, a negative number plus another number, if we go on the number line, we go from 0, 1, negative 2, negative 3, and then 1, 2, 3. We'd go from negative 3, we'd start right here, this would be negative 4. We start at negative 3, and we go two numbers to the right, or two spaces to the right. So we go two spaces to the right, and then we end up at negative 1. But if we just look at it as 2 minus 3, that's also negative 1. So if you're having difficulty with this problem, negative 3 plus 2, either rewind this video back to when we talk about that over here, or go back to the other video where we talk about addition and subtraction with negative numbers, which is more thorough on that subject. After all that's done, really what we have is our last piece here, which I think is way easier than addition and subtraction with negative numbers, is multiplying negative numbers. Multiplying negative numbers follows a pretty simple rule. If you have a positive number and you multiply that by a negative number, it eventually will come up to be a negative number. Okay? It can flip around too. You can have a positive number times a negative number, and that will also equal a negative number. You can think of it as unlike signs create a negative vibe or a negative number. Like signs, when we go negative times negative is a positive, like signs are positive vibe, and they become positive. So the basic rule is if one of the factors, the product, is negative and the other one is positive, the product is going to be negative. Or if a number is negative and a number is positive and they're being multiplied together, then it's negative. The other one, and kind of confusing one, is when a negative number times a negative number equals a positive number. You can also go back to multiplication with negative numbers video in order to get a more thorough understanding of that. So another further understanding, let's say we have, let's do an example real quick. Sorry about that. Let's do negative 4 times 2. We have this negative symbol right here. Let me write it a little bit bigger so you guys can for sure see it. Negative 4 times 2. Right here. Negative 4 times 2 equals, we have a negative number and a positive number. So that means the result is going to be negative. A lot of times when I'm doing multiplication, my first step is just figure out whether it's going to be negative or positive in the end result. So right here, I know that it's going to be negative. That's the first step I can do. I don't even have to worry about numbers at this point. I'm just worrying about signs. So a negative times a positive is going to be a negative at the end. Now what I can do is do the numbers part of it, and 4 times 2 is 8. So our answer is negative 8. Let's do a little flipped way. So we have a positive right here, 3. We have a positive, and we're multiplying that by negative 4. All right, so we have 3 times negative 4. Before we do anything with numbers or any computations with numbers, let's just look at the signs and figure out what our result is going to be. We have a positive sign and we have a negative sign. So a positive sign and a negative sign are eventually going to lead to a negative sign. Right off the bat, I know what the result, if it's going to be negative or positive. Now we can worry about the number side of it. 3 times 4 is 12. So our answer is going to be negative 12. Do you notice how in this example, the negative number was first and the positive number was second, and it was still negative? This second example, the first number is positive and the second number is negative, but it's still negative at the end. It doesn't matter which order the negative and the positive go. It's still going to be negative at the end if they're unlike signs. Now we can go to a relatively easy example, but based on this basic concept, that a negative number times a negative number equals a positive number. So let's do negative, 4 times negative 10. They tell you as a teacher, by the way, never to turn your back, but when I'm making these videos, it's kind of hard to hold both of these and do that. But negative number times a negative number is actually a positive number. So we know the sign already. Let's take our first step and just figure out whether our result is going to be negative or positive. And negative times a negative is actually going to be positive. So let's write a positive right here. So it's going to be positive 40. Negative 4 times negative 10 is positive 40. A lot of students will be like, well, can I just get rid of the, but do I have to have the plus sign in front of that? No, you don't at all, and you can erase that after it. Just that you know it's not negative. It's nice to know. Okay, let's do another quick one where we do negative, let's do negative 9, right here, negative 9 times negative 3. All right? First, let's forget about these numbers for a second and just worry about the sign. A negative times a negative, we know that from our rule right here, that it's going to be a positive. So it's going to be positive at the end. Do I have to write this plus in front of this answer? But no. But it helps me figure out whether it's going to be positive or negative. And then we just worry about the numbers. 9 times 3 is obviously 27. Not obviously, maybe you didn't know that, but it is 27. That's another example of a negative times a negative giving you a positive number. And if I didn't write this clear enough, let me put it in parentheses. Right here. And also, a real quick tidbit about parentheses. If I just had negative 9, and I didn't put a multiplication symbol right there, and I put the parentheses by it right there, that still means negative 9 times negative 3. And a negative negative would be a positive, and that would be positive 27 as well. Just for future reference. If you put anything next to a parenthesis, it automatically means multiplication. That about wraps it up for negative numbers, not just integers. This can work with any number. That a negative times a negative equals a positive, and a positive times a negative equals a negative. Also with addition and subtraction. These aren't just for integers, they'll work with any number. That's for Mr. O'Byrne. I'm Chase. Mr. Green also helped me out in the background, putting down examples, and I'm sure Landon might have something to say about the lesson today, the quick wrap up. I hope you guys enjoy the next adventure on the next unit, and I hope you do well in this test or unit or whatever you're doing after this.